In recognition of this game somehow stepping out into the spotlight again, I think it's only right to finally cover this game right here on True Review. After all, I've talked about it enough already. So as you may or may not know, a remake of this game came out recently to a mixed response, and while I am partially familiar with that version, I don't actually own a copy. Instead, we're going to be looking at the original 2001 South Korean release and see if it's any good. Even though I mentioned it in my last video. Originally released in South Korea, a translated version would eventually come out in English so we can finally see what the fuss was all about. The thing is with White Day is that I'm under the impression that it never truly stepped out into the spotlight properly. This one has been seen by many to be a cult classic, but one of those cult classics that no one really knows about. I only found out about it by searching for horror games worth playing that no one knows about, all in hopes of being the first to find it. But while I would say that I wasn't disappointed with my experience with this game, it does have a few things wrong with it that we'll inevitably get to. White Day, a labyrinth of a title, is set in a Korean high school after closing time. It's White Day, which is what I presume to be the Korean equivalent of Valentine's Day, where you play the part of a boy whose name I couldn't be bothered to wiki. You see, there's this girl at school that you like, and you want to give her some candy.
As is, of course, the tradition.
But also to return her diary because she found it lying on a bench, and the urge to find out her most deepest, darkest secrets seemed to have passed you by as you never even opened the bloody thing for a quick read. But then you come up with the ingenious plan of breaking into your school at night and leaving her gift and diary on her desk for her to find in the morning, rather than, say, giving it to her in person and letting her know how you feel, and for some reason this video has degenerated into Dating 101. Unfortunately for you though, this plan goes right out the window the moment you step foot into the school. For you see, the caretaker is Charlie Manson and doesn't take too kindly to kids being on the school premises at night. Apparently there was a staff meeting not too long ago, and the outcome of it was that all kids who were found on the school after closing hours should be brutally murdered on the spot. So, true, you're telling us that this game only has one enemy? Nope, because this is nighttime after all, and that means ghosts. Apparently, quite a few people have died over the years, and now their spirits wander the halls. Strange how no one has seen them during the day, but there you go. Seriously, don't even bother watching the intro cutscene, because there isn't really a plot here. Your main objective is to escape the school whilst weird shit keeps happening. I may have given you the impression at the beginning of this video, but this game has a lot of good stuff going on for it. The atmosphere for one is really unnerving. I can't really put my finger on it, which is pissing me off, but the moment you load up the game, there's just something not right about the school's general vibe. It's hard to put into words, but for reasons unknown, it just feels like a ghost is going to suddenly materialise through the wall and start stalking you. And I guess that the developers knew what they were doing and knew that the player would be feeling this as well, which is why it gets even more terrifying when that does finally happen. The ghosts in this game aren't as threatening as in, say, the Fatal Frame series, but I'd go so far as to say that the initial shock value of the ghosts in White Day is far greater. In Fatal Frame, if a ghost appears, then it tends to make its presence known to the player before attacking. In contrast, the ghosts in White Day won't really give away their positions. The only thing that may give you the impression that a ghost is nearby is usually small audible sounds, such as scratching. But any sane person would start to freak out a little upon hearing this noise, which only makes things worse when you quickly look around to see if there is one really near you, only to find a disembodied head silently moving through the air slowly towards you about 2 feet away. Having said that, that's where their threat to the player ends. Coming into contact with them will cause you to lose some health, but not much. In fact, if you wanted to be killed by one, then you'd have to spend a lot of time hanging around for them and actively trying to get injured. Most people will have bolted out of the area upon seeing these ghosts for the first time, so the odds of getting killed by one is almost zero. It doesn't help though that some of them look realistic, and I only found about this a few months ago, but that's partly thanks to these images being taken from an actual book on ghost sightings. Look, here's one now. Fake book, mind you, and always question the validity of supposed ghost sightings, but it still adds this extra layer of fear. It's kind of like, the atmosphere is great as is, and this is just the cherry on the cake. Not exactly necessary, but it's a nice added bonus. Speaking of which, I have to say that the graphics adds to the tension too. I've watched a few Let's Plays of the remake, and it just doesn't seem to have that same feel to it. It feels like a total conversion mod, which isn't a bad thing, but it feels more like that the devs were primarily focused on making the school look pretty, rather than creating an oppressive atmosphere, and this just means that this new version of the game just doesn't feel as terrifying as the original. Okay, let's talk jump scares for a moment. I know. Now, while some people would say there are two kinds of jump scares, one where an image suddenly appears on the screen and screams, and one where something will happen suddenly, I'd actually say that that last one doesn't count as a jump scare. Now, if you take that approach, then there are no jump scares in White Day at all. You must have seen it in movies where a character has seen some stuff and then goes into the bathroom to wash their face and calm down, only to then see their reflection has suddenly leaned out of the mirror and grabbed them. Well, I wouldn't call that a jump scare. That's more along the lines of defying our expectations, which, if used right, can lead to a scare. If we don't suspect something scary to happen, but then it happens, that's not necessarily a jump scare. It's a betrayal of your expectations, and it leaves you feeling vulnerable. That's why it's scary. But having something suddenly pop up and scream at you, that's a jump scare. The reason I mention this is because White Day has one of the best examples I could ever give of a moment that betrays our expectations. Near the beginning, you're walking down a corridor when all of a sudden we enter a cutscene. During this scene, we can see that a girl is being hung by her neck further ahead of us. As lightning strikes, she falls to the floor but is hidden in the shadows. As more lightning strikes, we can see that she's now slowly crawling over towards us. Another long pause with no lightning is there for us to start believing that, at her current pace, she'll be on top of us any moment. When lightning strikes for the final time, we realise that she's disappeared. The cutscene ends there and we resume control of the player. You look around, but she's not there. Okay, so she's gone. I guess that cutscene was there to get me worked up and on edge for what's further into the game. Nothing else here, so I guess I'll just go, Jesus Christ! You're not expecting that to happen in the situation that the game has created, and that's why it's scary. Having a face suddenly appear on the screen and scream at you is not expected either, but has no relevance to the general gameplay, or is usually something you can't avoid anyway. Whereas this entire scene that I just showed you can be completely avoided if you never go to this area at all. To sum everything up so far, this game does wonders at creating a very threatening and foreboding atmosphere, and in such a way that is rarely seen these days. But I just cannot believe that after creating such a wonderful and terrifying work of art, that the devs then decided to add elements in that helps to ruin it all. Easily the worst part of this game is this guy. This is a caretaker I mentioned before. Now, despite everything I've said so far up to this point, this guy's actually your biggest threat here. He will constantly patrol the school grounds and will chase you whenever he sees you. If he catches up, and he will, then he'll try to beat you to death. The problem here with this guy is twofold. One, he doesn't actually patrol the school grounds, he only patrols the area that you are in, and two, you can't hide from him because he has X-ray vision and can see through walls and shit. And this is a problem whenever you encounter him. In most other games, if you're spotted by an enemy and have no means of fighting back, then you can just outrun them and hide somewhere. Sure, they'll come looking for you, and even check some of the hiding places, but if they don't find you after a while, then they'll just give up. This guy doesn't, however. He knows where you are hiding even when you break line of sight. Hide in the girls' toilets, and he knows which cubicle you are in the moment he enters. It means that hiding doesn't work. What does work though? Well, I found a glitch that helps, but only near the end of the game. By hiding behind a small wall, I was finding that this guy was getting stuck there, and when the game realised that this wasn't working, he'd just dematerialise for some reason, and I'd be able to carry on for another 10 minutes. What a load of bollocks! The game has quite clearly established that this guy isn't a ghost, but you sure had me fooled! This also creates a problem when solving puzzles. They're not obvious in this game, and some of them are quite hard to figure out. Many of them require time to think them through, but that's gonna be an issue, because the janitor keeps interrupting me. Sure, it's a little scary the first time he chases you, but all times after that, it's just fucking annoying. He is the embodiment of a nuisance, an element that is there purely to hinder the player's progression, and there is nothing scary about going through the motions of trying to lose this guy for the 20th time. Speaking of puzzles, some of them are downright awful, but not because of the puzzles themselves. Translation issues are at play here and can enrage the player. Near the start, there's a puzzle involving opening a safe. To figure out the combination, you need to count how many basketballs, volleyballs, footballs, and baseballs there are around the school. Adding up the numbers will give you the code to the safe. However, the instructions left next to the safe tells you which way to turn the dial, which sounds helpful on paper, especially this piece of paper, but it's too bad that whoever translated this game doesn't know their left from their right. So even when you do have the correct code, the game is instructing you to input it incorrectly. I spent half an hour the first time I played this, trying to figure out where I was going wrong, and researching the school over and over again until I figured out that you're supposed to turn the dial in the other direction, instead of what the notes was telling you. There's also some other really weird shit that I think was supposed to be scary but wasn't, such as walking through the pool with some tuning rods, and if you get it wrong then you get thrown back to the start, or that part where a massive demon baby's head suddenly bursts through the door. I found that part to be laughable rather than scary. And then there's some woman who charges at you with knives and... yeah. By this point the plot has kind of devolved into a convoluted mess, and now it's more about trying to deal with bizarre and annoying shit for a few minutes before resuming your escape from the janitor. And that's a shame, because the first half of this game is really good. In fact, I'd recommend that you play up to the part with the massive hall with loads of walkways in it and just stop there. The rest of the game isn't that good if I'm honest, and several puzzles after this point are timed. And not reasonably timed either. You've only got enough time to do exactly what you're supposed to do. If you're bumbling about looking for where to go, then you might as well reload your last save because you're not going to make it in time. In conclusion, White Day started off on an incredibly strong note. It demonstrated how well it understood horror and presented itself as a worthy title into the genre. I do recommend this game, and you can find the translated version online, so give it a go if you feel up to the challenge. But ultimately, this game reminds me of Career itself. One half of it works really well, but the less said about the other half, the better.
Sometimes I think this life is killing me.